I also saw Will Pepper from Syndicate. Would you like to say hi or any question to Joy?
And if you don't have questions, I can keep talking too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just getting quickly to a place to talk. Hey, Jerry, we met briefly at the Media Lab. I was working on mesh networks in 2013, and that brought me down the crypto rabbit hole. So here we are. Yeah, quite the journey over the past nearly a decade, from decentralization to crypto. One thing I'm very curious about is the dynamics of wondering, of seeing spaces go mainstream. So for example, at Syndicate, we are building investment clubs and investment DAOs. And one thing that we keep on thinking about is as soon as you have a good fiat on-ramp and off-ramp, the number of users, when they can suddenly go from bank account to smart contract, will easily 10x or 100x. And what we're trying to figure out internally is, do we wait for that technology to develop, or do we try to work around it and work with what's available in the meantime? I'm curious about your thoughts on essentially, and you know change is coming, but not ready yet. Do you about the dynamics of waiting for it to happen versus trying to work with the hacky, less good solutions that exist today?
Yeah, I don't have a perfect answer to that question. I mean, I think that I think that first, getting experience in collecting data is super important. So I think the extent to which you can do stuff and learn stuff that's applicable for after when the people come, I think that's really good. And I think one of the things that's important is to get really good at instrumenting everything so that you're collecting information and that you're able to start to learn what are the things that increase adoption and all that. So that's really important. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff around sort of KYC and fraud detection and all that other stuff that needs to be built. And it's, again, it will be different when you've got lots of people, but it's all still stuff that needs to get built. I mean, I often take pages out of the like PayPal playbook, because I used to work with Reed. I still work with him a lot, but Reed said either a couple of really interesting stories that relate to maybe what you're saying from PayPal, because I think that when they were really growing, the thing that allowed PayPal to survive that everybody else died in was really the fraud stuff, and they spent a tremendous amount of energy on that. And until they turned that around, and they were losing millions of dollars a month or something, it was just crazy, is one thing. And I think that also, the sort of compliance related stuff will get harder and continue to get worse before it gets better. So I think that would be something that I build up if you can right now. But the other thing that this isn't really directly answering your question, but a very non-intuitive thing that Reed always says, which I love, is he has this motto: ignore your customer. And the other one is let fires burn. And where this comes from is that when you're early, like you are, the number of future customers is orders of magnitude more than your current customers. So if all you're doing is dealing with complaints from your current customers and putting out those fires, you're not thinking about the future customers. And so even if all of your current customers hate you, including Poseidon, the future customer is more important, right? And so, for instance, when his whole house was burning down, they literally stopped answering support calls to try to just fix some of the things around, say, fraud and stuff that they were dealing with. And so that's sort of a counterintuitive thing. And I think a lot of companies, especially if you create your company around a version of the product before the Rails are done, and then suddenly the Rails come and the Rails are bringing in a completely new kind of customer with an experience that your current customers don't want. But if the future customer is actually where the big enchilada is, trying to really keep the experience for the old timers can slow you down and make a big opening for your competitors. And it sort of weirdly reminds me of, and this is again a different model, but like just the fact that OpenSea is going to have a hard time doing a token drop because they're so aligned around their VC model equity. So it's opened up the ability for other markets to do more native DAO kind of architectures. And again, I think there's a good chance OpenSea will survive, but just their architecture that's built around the previous version isn't that resilient against the future. And so the other risk, just a meta risk about where you are now, is just you're kind of in the early adopter phase, right? And if you design your whole product around an early adopter, it may not work for the next one. Now, having said that, you know, it may be that your later adopters, and this is kind of, I remember when AOL connected to the internet, the internet suddenly became really stupid, you know, and I think one of the meta questions about when the Rails get created, like things like that we take for granted, like, oh, of course people want to control their own wallets. I mean, I'm sure everyone's had this conversation, but when the Rails come on and we go from 30% adoption to 100% adoption of Web3, will most people really want to control their wallets, or will they just want to be like Web 2 again? You know, and I think that's a risk. I mean, the fact that we're happy having 10 different messengers. I remember when the whole internet was about making email one network, and to try to get rid of all these separate networks. And the whole point of the initial internet was just so I could send mail to you without having multiple different mail logins. Well, we're back to those days with Messenger, because people don't seem to care anymore. And so I worry that a lot of the values that are sort of core to Web3 right now can easily be corrupted, and we can end up in a fake Web3, just like we have a fake messenger system again, you know. And so and those all affect kind of where your product target is. And so maybe to actually answer your question, I think that there's a possibility by having massive adoption that the nature and the values of your users shift away from our kind of hippie, you know, summer of love Web3 feel to something that's a lot more boring, you know. And I guess that's, you know, it's sort of thinking about it as sort of the user experience perspective. I'm not sure how that plays out. I hope it doesn't, but I think that's a risk.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Thank you so much. Definitely thinking about, the users who aren't accessing crypto now but may access it in the future is a very interesting way to frame it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.